The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Sunday, the 12th of July, 2026. Welcome to This Week with Mary Holland, President of Children's Health Defense, and myself, Polly Tommey. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, Polly.
All right, let's go on with the first article. It is Henrik Carlson in The Defender, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to create COVID vaccine injury table. Will more people finally be compensated for injuries? So HHS plans to propose a rule in November establishing a formal injury table for COVID-19 vaccines. The proposal would undergo a public comment period expected to run into early 2027 before any final rule could take effect. Under the PrEP Act, HHS was legally required to create the table, but never did. In May, attorney Ray Flores sued the agency to compel it to create the table. Wow, Mary.
This is fabulous news, Polly. As we know, hundreds of thousands of people reported that they were injured by the COVID shots. A small subset knew about the need to register within 1 year with the Countermeasures Injury Compensation Program to ask for compensation, what wasn't covered by other insurance or Medicare or Medicaid. Many people didn't file. But among those that did, it's all on paper. There's no hearing. There's really no clear rules of procedure. It's all within Health and Human Services. And most people were just abjectly rejected. Most people got a pittance of money for their injuries. And like this plaintiff in this case, they were severely injured, but the requirements of the PrEP Act are that it has to be what they call a serious injury. And it also, as the statute requires, if you declare the PrEP Act and you have this countermeasures program, you have to say what the injuries are that you're going to cover. And that's never been done for COVID. And COVID started in 2020. So this is really a very important step. And I hope, Polly, it will give people who have been severely injured, once they put out the table saying, we hope and presume myocarditis will be covered. I hope turbocancers of some kind will be covered. I hope some of the dementia that we saw that happened super quickly after these COVID shots will be covered. And it will reset the statute of limitations, right? So if they didn't know that they could file, and it'll be a little complicated, frankly, but I think it's a very important development, and I'm very happy that it's happened, that now finally there is a table of injuries for what happened to people from COVID shots.
Same with Henrik again for the next article. Study of 208 infant deaths highlights unsafe sleep but omits key data on vaccination status. This is Cook County, Illinois, recorded 208 sudden unexpected infant deaths from 2019 to 2023. A new analysis of the deaths focused heavily on sleep environments, concluding that unsafe sleeping was largely to blame. But what other conditions could account for the alarming rate? And what data did the researchers ignore or exclude? Yes, what indeed? What data?
Polly, Cook County is part of Chicago, and it's primarily African American. And so this study was from 2019 through 2023. What to me was really striking about this study that focuses on sleep, that for the most part I think is nonsense, Polly. What they found is that a quarter of these early deaths were premature infants. A third of them had spent time in the neonatal intensive care unit. Black infants are 14 times more likely to die of SIDS than white infants. Hispanic infants are 2.3 times more likely to die. These are terrible statistics. The article, I do believe that vaccination is probably one of the primary causes here. Vaccinations are not listed. We don't know. But I do want to mention that the article links to a very important memo that Wyeth did in 1979. Wyeth was acquired by Pfizer. And this is a memo that is hyperlinked in this article that shows that Wyeth was aware of babies dying in clusters from a single lot number of a particular vaccine. I think at the time it was DTP. And so instead of saying, oh my gosh, we have a problem, our product is killing babies, what the memo says is, gee, just to avoid this appearance that, potentially maybe out of the, incredibly, the vaccines caused the deaths, we will never going forward send one lot of vaccines to one place. We'll send them all over the country. So if there are deaths, it won't be so suspicious. I believe that's a criminal memo that is obscuring death by their product. That was actually before their liability shield. But it gives people an idea that these mega industries really can be absolutely ruthless when they know or they highly suspect that they are killing infants. They would rather avoid that truth than actually, they would rather distribute their product than confront that truth.
Yeah, I remember interviewing a pediatrician on the bus, and she stopped vaccinating. And she did vaccinate, but over 2 years, so nothing under 2 years. And she said there was no SIDS since she started doing that. And it would be very interesting to find out how many SIDS cases in unvaxxed babies that there are. I just find that
Good point, Polly. Very good point. Let's talk to Brian Hooker about that.
Right. Okay. So staying with SIDS, this is Suzanne Burdick. Half of SIDS cases occurred within 48 hours of vaccination. Former police detective says. She said she was involved in roughly 250 sudden infant deaths or SIDS. The cases said coroners did not include vaccination history in their reports, even when police reports included the information. And any coroners out there, we would love to hear from you if you could talk to us about this subject.
We would. And one exciting development, Polly, for 2027 is that 2 states, Louisiana and Oklahoma, are going to be requiring recent vaccination data for any infant deaths. So we're going to see some changes in the factual foundation for this issue that has been obscured for the last 50 years.
Jill Erzin here. COVID exposed global threat many thought was unthinkable. Holocaust survivor says. This is Vera Sharav. She was on CHD TV talking about her new book, Never Again Is Now Global, warning that the same forces that enabled the Holocaust are re-emerging worldwide, drawing parallels to the COVID-19 response. Sharav urged people to question authority rather than blindly follow it. Without our obedience, they are powerless, she said. It was a very good interview, and she's so strong with her words. And really, if we can't listen to someone like Vera, then what's it all about?
Yeah, I urge people to go back on our CHD TV website and watch Never Again Is Now Global, the 5-part series where Holocaust survivors talk about their impressions of COVID and they draw the parallels. And there's a lot of really important history about the Holocaust and about World War II that I never knew, about US funding of the Nazi regime, about what happened at the end of the war, about how Nazi scientists came to the United States. But when somebody like Vera Sharav says, be very, very attentive. What is happening now happened in the 1930s. We have to stop and listen. We can't ignore that warning. And this book goes into much greater depth. It's very well resourced. It's a number of really fascinating authors. I highly recommend it.
Absolutely. Michael Neverdakis here. Congress asks Pfizer and Merck for details about clinical trials in China. This is Representative John Moulinar, chairman of the US House of Representatives Select Committee on China, and in June launched an investigation into several drug makers' clinical trial sites in China at locations allegedly linking to China's military. What's that about?
Polly, not only linking to China's military, but also sites in Xinjiang province where the US government has declared since 2021 that a genocide of the Uyghur population is going on. Obviously, if people are in detention camps, they cannot possibly give informed consent. This is really troubling that there are clinical trials going on basically in places with genocide going on. It's just, and that's Pfizer. It's so, clinical trials, Polly, for the most part, don't happen in the United States. For the most part, they happen in third world countries where people have many fewer options in life, and the opportunity to get a little bit of money may seem worth it. It's very disappointing. I mean, it's unethical.
Michael Nevadakis here, again, defender. Maryland doctor faces possible 50-year jail sentence. Is it because he promoted monoclonal antibodies instead of COVID vaccines? It's 2021. It was Dr. Ron Ethelbein. He went on Fox News to criticize the Biden administration's policies limiting access to monoclonal antibodies. Now the federal government indicted him on 5 counts of medical fraud, alleging he billed insurance companies for a higher level of treatment than provided.
This is insane. Okay, so this guy is probably in a retaliatory situation. He is charged by the federal government in Maryland. He's indicted, he's acquitted, but because it was retaliation, the judge actually overturned the jury verdict. That's really rare, but the judge was like, there's no evidence here that this guy actually broke the law. Then the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers Maryland, reversed, and they supported the jury verdict, not the judge's verdict. And so then the case was appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court didn't take it. So this guy is now going to be, Dr. Elfenbein is going to be going to trial in January 2027 and faces 50 years in prison. And he is alleged to have miscoded these procedures. And the article goes into depth. He coded them on a scale of 1 to 5 as a 4. And the government is saying you miscoded them, but the government won't say what the right code was. And literally, we're talking about a $250 coding error. This is just a bizarre case. It's very hard to understand why they brought it, except that it was retaliatory. He is truly a whistleblower, and I'm really glad we're covering this story. This is just a really bizarre case.
Federal court rules against Amish families in religious exemption case. Will Supreme Court have the last word? So, Mary, what have you got on that?
Well, Polly, this is an important case that ICANN brought with Aaron Siri on behalf of Amish, saying the Amish came to the United States 300 years ago to freely practice their religion. Vaccination is not part of their religion. They should have the right to practice freely. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals that covers New York State said no, the repeal of the religious exemption is generally, it's a neutral law, it's generally applicable, it applies to everybody. They don't have a religious right. They don't have a First Amendment right not to vaccinate. So that case went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court sent it back and without taking the case and said, review this in light of Mahmoud v. Taylor. Mahmoud v. Taylor was a case where parents were allowed to take their kids out of class because they were teaching same-sex marriage, and parents that didn't want that were allowed, based on their parental rights and on their religious beliefs, First Amendment, to take the kids out. And it was the court said in that Mahmoud v. Taylor case, you have to apply strict scrutiny. In other words, what the government does has to be the least restrictive means possible, not to infringe on these very, very deeply held rights. So the Second Circuit basically tweaked its nose, in my opinion, at the Supreme Court, and they said, nope, we looked at it in light of Mahmoud, and everything was great the way we decided it before. You don't have a right to a religious exemption, and the Second Circuit did not do what the Supreme Court ordered it to do. So my best guess is that the Supreme Court is going to take this case up again. And I was astonished, Polly, but one of the most pro-vax scholars alive, Dr. Lawrence Gostin, who teaches at Georgetown Law School, he said that he thinks the Supreme Court will grant a national religious exemption, which I have said before. So I think this is going to go to the Supreme Court, and I think the Supreme Court is going to find that there is a First Amendment right to religious freedom to not vaccinate. So stay tuned. This story continues.
All right, Cheryl Atkinson here. I love this article. A Parent's Guide to the Vaccine Debate, Revised Schedule, Safety Data, and What's Next. This is journalist Cheryl Atkinson, provides access to the CDC's hard-to-find revised vaccine schedule. She points out the changes made earlier this year. All children have DTaP, Hib, pneumococcal, polio, MMR, HPV, and chickenpox, reducing HPV vaccine from 2 doses to 1, downgrading to only certain high-risk groups, RSV, Hep A, Hep B, dengue, meningococcal ACW, and meningococcal B. Shared clinical decisions on rotavirus, COVID-19, influenza, meningococcal disease, Hep A, and Hep B. So it's not what we want, but it's a lot better than it was.
Right. And it's being challenged right now because these were recommendations that didn't go through ACIP. ACIP itself has been challenged. So all of this is sort of a little bit murky at the moment, but I agree with you. It's an excellent article. It strongly recommends the book Turtles All the Way Down that my colleague Zoe O'Toole and I had the privilege to edit. And I did the foreword for. And she discusses how science has been corrupted, how the pharmaceutical industry is so influential with American Academy of Pediatrics that they're bashing Bobby Kennedy because he is indeed trying to change the schedule. It's not all that we want, Polly. For instance, the Gardasil vaccine, the HPV vaccine, we know people who die after the first dose. So it's still pretty heavy on vaccines, but if people have choices and if doctors become better educated, I think we are already seeing change.
And Mary, I met a mother the other day whose first child was injured by vaccines, and she read Turtles All the Way Down, and she stopped vaccinating and now has really strong, healthy children. So well done. And we can still get that book, people.
Oh, yeah.
On Amazon.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to be careful because there's a fake Turtles All the Way Down. This is one of Pharma's other tricks to make it hard for you to find the right information. But Turtles All the Way Down, edited by Zoe O'Toole and Mary Holland.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, do get that, people, and send it to those young mums because I'm seeing it's making a massive difference, Mary. Suzanne Burdick, what happens to my child when I die? The crisis facing parents of adults with autism. Well, this is exactly the same question I asked when I was on the Ron Johnson hearing to the senators, what is going to happen to our children? And Mary, I just want to say that I truly believe at the moment, as things stand, parents, we have to band together and look for that future for our adults ourselves, because what is being built, with a few exceptions, is not okay for our children to be in.
No, you're right, Polly. The options are terrible. This is a very informative article that quotes our friend John Gilmore, who is serving on the Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee. And he's saying housing for the young adults who became autistic in the 90s, it is a really high priority. These people are in their 20s, 30s, 40s now. 27% of people diagnosed with autism have what is now being called profound autism. Jill Escher is interviewed here. I didn't know about this, Polly. The National Council on Severe Autism. Very few parents have a real plan for what's going to happen. The article mentions Andy Wakefield's new book, Bequest, that he wants to make into a movie about this issue. It is a huge issue. And John Gilmore, I think, sadly, Polly, correctly says the situation is likely to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, it is. It's dire. And it's sad because our children who have been injured by vaccines, they deserve a future.
They deserve so much. They deserve so much.
Yeah.
And John Gilmore goes into some of the really interesting points. You know, there's this, and Brian Hooker is quoted extensively here too. There's this kind of wishful thinking about the disability community, that they can all be integrated perfectly into the community, which then tends to means that these people are put in urban environments, which are very overstimulating for a lot of people with autism. A more rural, quiet, serene environment is probably a better environment for a lot of people with profound autism, if not most or all. But that's not really available given the laws right now around disabilities and trying to integrate them into the community. So it's an issue that I know we'll be coming back to, Polly. It's a critical issue.
Yeah, I mean, I've got so much to say on the subject. So, yes, we will. We should do more shows on it as well. But I used to do that with Dr. Sheila Ely. We did that a lot. So we greatly missed, actually. So we will come back to it. Okay, Defender here, KFF Health News. A mum said infant formula killed her baby. The manufacturer didn't tell the FDA. It's an internal memo. Mead Johnson concluded there was not a reasonable possibility that the company's formula caused the baby's death. So no further investigation is needed. This file can be closed. And so that's what the memo said. And with that, the decision, the company narrowed the chance that the mother's anguish could draw attention to any danger the formula might pose to other infants. So that's shocking.
Polly, this is a shocking story. I want to go a little bit more into depth on this. So Abbott Labs makes Similac. We've probably all seen that. And Mead Johnson makes Enfamil. These are the two big formulas for babies, and there's particular formulas for premature babies. So it turns out that the scientists at these two companies absolutely know that if you give this cow-based formula to babies who are under 1,500 grams, very, premature babies, that it is very dangerous. But they didn't warn about that. They didn't do anything to mitigate the risks on that. So this has led to major litigation. And so there are 1,760 cases for what's called necrotizing enterocolitis, NEC. And 2,300 babies have died of this in the last, from 2017 to 2023. So, one a day approximately. So a Missouri appeals court upheld a $495 million verdict, that must be with punitive damages, saying that Abbott Laboratories' conduct was, quote unquote, significantly reprehensible. The other big verdict, $60 million, was overturned on appeal. But what is really clear is that they didn't ever report to the FDA. The FDA has been, working on behalf of industry in 2024, saying there's no conclusive evidence that these formulas are causing NEC. But what it looks like from discovery in these lawsuits that's included in this article is that the scientists absolutely knew that it was extremely dangerous to be giving this formula to very premature infants, and they didn't do anything about it. So it just, again, you just see that industry is about making money for shareholders, and they really don't care if they kill babies in the process. That's really what these documents show us. And it is shocking to a normal person, Polly. It is shocking.
I interviewed a woman the other day who said to me, I'm sick of the poisoning. It's everywhere. Our children are being poisoned. So it's not just vaccines, the formula, the food.
It's true.
It goes on and on and on. It has to stop. Common dreams here. Single pouch of Gerber baby food contains about 5,000 microplastics particles. Many of us think of plastic as a simple single material. It is not. It is made from more than 16,000 chemicals, including 4,200 known to harm human health. Babies are uniquely vulnerable to these chemicals. Their organs and nervous systems are developing rapidly. Even small exposures to certain chemicals can have lifelong effects on growth.
Again, what you just said, this is just poisoning babies, Polly. So here's 1 gram of Happy Baby Organics made by Gerber, that's the size of a raisin, they say, would have 495 microplastics per teaspoon. This is just insane. So we absolutely have to teach people to get plastics away from babies. Don't buy these plastic pouches. When Polly, we had young children, we had these little glass jars that were a lot less dangerous than what they're doing now. These plastic things, no doubt, are cheaper to make, but they're dangerous. One of the other things in this article, Polly, it says there's 16,000 chemicals that go into plastics, 4,200 of which are known to be harmful, right? So 25% they know are harmful to humans, and probably a lot more than that. Plastic is dangerous. It's really dangerous.
And it's everywhere. Jill Erzan here. So many threats. UK outlines plan to control what public can see on YouTube. So John Campbell warned that a proposed UK media policy could give designated trusted news providers like the BBC an unprecedented advantage on YouTube and other platforms. My concern, he says, is that the state is going to mandate what videos are promoted.
Well, Polly, this is very troubling, and kudos for John Campbell to calling this out. This is why Children's Health Defense several years ago brought the case against the Trusted News Initiative that includes BBC, Associated Press, Washington Post. There's this, what they call a green paper, I think we would call it a white paper in the UK, outlining how they want to create this law that the government basically is engaged in full-scale propaganda. They decide everything, what goes on the media, on YouTube, and what doesn't. So full-scale censorship and propaganda. And we have this current lawsuit. The courts have been very slow to deal with it, but this is what we oppose vehemently. You cannot have the government censor the media and decide what propaganda is suitable. It's bad enough as it is. What they're proposing in the UK would be a whole new level of harm. And really, Polly, would just take the UK full on into a kind of Chinese censorship propaganda model.
Dr. Joseph McCullough here, and back to microplastics. Microplastics in arteries linked to 4.5 times higher risk of stroke and heart attack. Researchers have pulled plastic particles straight out of diseased artery walls and stroke-related blood clots. Animal studies suggest that nanoparticles, the smallest fragments measured in billionths of a meter, slip past the blood-brain barrier into the brain itself.
Nanoplastics, the smallest ones are the most dangerous. So apparently Dr. McCullough has recently published a book called Microplastics Cure that's mentioned in this article. And that may be helpful for us, but we have to be really much, I think I personally need to be more vigilant about plastics in every part of that we come into contact with it.
I didn't realize that the rugs that you buy for your house are plastic. Apparently, there are plastic particles all in them. Someone told me that last night, and I was just like, I had no idea. You have to buy pure wool rugs, which cost a fortune. But there's so many things to look around your house and just say, well, okay, how's that made?
I don't need that. Yeah.
Antidepressant drug sales on track to reach $9.37 billion by 2030. The mental health industry has created a fear campaign around depression as a disease that requires early intervention and treatment, leading to 17.8% of Americans being treated for depression, most of them with drugs. And my goodness, have we not been having some ghastly stories on the side effects of those drugs?
So this is a sort of deep dive on what the clinical trials for fluoxetine, which is, and the commercial name is Prozac, what they saw in the clinical trials. So this is by Dr. Peter Gutcha, who is a founder of the Cochrane Collaborative. And he said back in 2024 that drugs are the leading cause of death in the world, above cancer and heart disease. So he and David Healy, another real paragon of exposing corruption in medicine, they looked at the clinical trials. Polly, in the first clinical trial investigation for fluoxetine for children, there were 2 suicide attempts that they took out of the data. Apparently, the European Medicines Agency did have concerns about Prozac, but they got buried. One of the big side effects of Prozac that, again, they didn't disclose it all, is it has a huge impact on people's sex lives. They can't have any responsiveness in sexual contact. It's just horrible, the lies that this industry is willing to tell to sell products that will kill children. That's what it boggles my mind, Polly. It does. It just boggles my mind.
This is Task and Purpose. Annual religious liberty training for troops could be on the way. A White House panel recommended the training. Pentagon officials said they welcome the recommendations. The aim is to secure domestic religious liberty. Well, Mary, I wonder if duty to disobey had any part of that.
It might have. It might have, for sure. I think the Religious Liberty Commission has been meeting since May 2025, and I attended one of their meetings, and it was a very serious commission that heard from a lot of people about all of the different problems around religious liberty in this country. And it's great news. What we saw in our film, Duty to Disobey, is that the military had no idea what religious liberty meant, and that really what happened, particularly in the Navy, was, well, throughout the military, was overtly illegal, forcing people to take an emergency use authorization product. But that in particular in the Navy, we see in the film that they just had an illegal process where they were trying to make it look as if they were looking at religious accommodation, when they just had an automatic procedure to reject every single religious accommodation request. So this is great news. I hope the film played a role in it. I don't really know, to be honest with you, but the military must take seriously the religious convictions of its members. And if it doesn't, people won't go to the military.
When we were at the Austin Theatre for Duty to Disobey, there were some teenagers in there, and as they were leaving, they were just like, okay, that's the military out, and there's no way, having watched the film. That is not the purpose of making the film, but when you see what goes on in there, that they are just lab rats, as you so say in the film, I mean, there's no way you would want your child to go into that, which is such a shame, because the military is actually an exciting thing to go into. You can train to be a pilot. There's so many things that you can do.
Yeah, no, it's true. It potentially it can be a really honorable, really valuable pursuit, career. But the military through COVID really shot itself in the foot.
All right, listen, everybody, do you know somebody that can be a contractor for us on social media for The Defender, which is a very exciting department to work for? We actually all work very closely together. They're really looking, and they're looking for someone soon, please, who's creative, strategic, data-driven, who understands both journalism and digital marketing, has excellent news judgment, can help execute and develop social media for The Defender. Now, if you do, can you email editor.defender@children'shealthdefense.org. So that's editor.defender@children'shealthdefense.org. And then put in the subject line Defender Social Media. And we're very excited if there's someone out there that can come join our team. The Defenders team will be so grateful. So it's a fun place to work.
Oh, it's a great place to work. We have the best people, Polly, like you. And what we do here, Polly, is 90% based on Defender content. So it's a way to really promote Defender, get more readers. We are censored, so we need somebody who can help us get around the censors, because the information that we put out is so literally life-changing, life and death decision making for people.
All right, everyone. Well, that's the news for this week with Mary Holland and myself. And we will be back next week. And I will be live with you tomorrow morning on CHD TV. But until then, pray big, stand firm, never settle. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Polly. Bye, everybody. What made you decide to write this book? And you say that you've been working on this for 10 years. What led you to really do this remarkable deep dive into the subject, which is obviously very hard to research because so much of it is secret or is kind of shrouded?
Well, I realized that we were being sprayed from the moment I saw my first chemtrail that I was able to verify. And it was just a non-starter for me. It was just a big red line that was crossed. You know what I mean? Because I was looking at all these other conspiracies and things, and these were things that you could basically avoid if you wanted to. Mm-hmm. Like, let's say you're looking into the mafia or something, you know what I mean? You don't have to deal with the mafia. You can go do other things, you know what I mean? And those are, they constantly engage in conspiracies. Mm-hmm. But the chemtrails thing was something that was unavoidable.
It's involuntary. What we look at is like compulsory medicine or use of pesticides or non-labeling of GMO products, right? This is sort of, you don't even know what's happening to you, and yet it could be literally really having a huge impact on your life. So.
Yeah, and I'd like to clarify that it's actually been more than 10 years. I started in 2009. That's when I made my first bone. I came out with the California Air Resources Board data showing contamination of the air that we breathe statewide. And then I did a big weather modification investigation for 2 years. And I've basically been following up on that original weather modification investigation since then.
Wow.
And I came out with the findings of my original weather modification investigation in 2012. And then but then the book was the set what is basically this. There was actually a precursor to this. It was my self-published edition, which came out in 2020. And that was basically the milestone that I was looking for that had everything in there. But as soon as that came out, I started doing more research. I did another maybe year and a half of chemtrail research after the book came out in 2020. And then I've, since done more. So, I mean, all in total, I really only took like maybe 2 or 3 years off to write a couple of other books in this whole 17 years. And it's not like I completely put down the chemtrail research in the 2 or 3 years that I took to write the other 2 books that I wrote, The Fall of San Francisco and From Little Acorns. It was always something that I was tending to. But then when the Tennessee bill came out, when they started pushing these anti-geoengineering bills on a state level, I said to myself, okay, it's time to get back in this because things are moving. Because prior to that, the space kind of died down a little bit. So I went and did something else for a little while, but it really wasn't that long that I went and did something else. I've basically been researching this thing nonstop since 2009.
So one of the points that you make in the book is that there's a connection when you put all this particulate matter in the atmosphere. There's a connection with electromagnetic radiation. And one of the things that we focus on here at Children's Health Defense are the hazards of wireless radiation, and that it's essentially unregulated. There's not really informed consent. We don't really know everything that it's doing. How is there a connection with electromagnetic radiation and this spraying that's happening?
The most documented connection are things that you can see in the HAARP patents that talk about
what's HAARP? Tell us first what HAARP.
High frequency active auroral research project. It's what's known as an ionospheric heater. It's up in Alaska. It was the first big powerful one. So there's a group of patents that are associated with HAARP, the facility up there, and they came out around the time that the first version of HAARP came out, and those speak to HAARP's ability to move air masses around with electromagnetic energy. And my science advisor is an expert in the field of electromagnetic energy, specifically how it affects the human body, and she's been getting on this thing about there's a map that you can access online that a lot of other people have been accessing as well, but she recently just found it was a big revelation for her that shows NEXRAD activity.
What is NEXRAD activity?
NEXRAD are weather radar stations that are there's a whole bunch of them across the country. I think there's maybe 50 of them. 40 or 50 of them across the country, if I'm not mistaken. There's a map that you can see and see their range and everything. And, Jenny, with her, I am unqualified to make the statement that, yes, NEXRAD is doing this, but Jenny is.
Who is Jenny?
Jenny Silcox. Jenny Silcox. She was in the program with me on the Attack on Food and Farmers Symposium with me, her, and Marvin Herndon. We were followed by James Corbett and RFK. Meryl Nass organized that whole thing. But, she tells me, and we continue to look into this. And she just did an appearance on another show called Agent X11 that's available on Rumble. And where that was her thing for that show, was talking about how NEXRAD is having an effect upon particles in the atmosphere and water vapor, and basically just manipulating weather systems. So I intend to look further into that. The minute you start talking about electromagnetic energy, stuff gets really complicated really quick. So I'm proceeding with caution here and saying what I can say. And when Jenny, who's a career expert on this, tells me that, and there's a lot of other people saying this as well. When Jenny tells me that NEXRAD is the local radar facilities are doing this. So you have HAARP up in Alaska doing the big heavy lifting, and we can get into what the heavy lifting is. But NEXRAD is doing it on a more local and a more regional basis.
Okay, we are live. Tell us your names.
My name is Nick Kendall.
My name is Melissa Pike,
And who is this?
and this is Sawyer John Kendall.
Our son.
All right, let's go back to when you were pregnant, because this only happened last year. So let's go back to when you were pregnant with Sawyer. Did you guys ever have a conversation about vaccines in any way?
When I was pregnant,
I don't think it was really, no, while she was pregnant.
Did you get any vaccines when you were pregnant?
no.
No.
So did they try and push them on you?
No. Not
That's
on me.
unusual. Okay, so when Sawyer was born, how was he?
When he was born, he was beautiful. He was perfect. He was 7 pounds, 7 ounces. He was breastfeeding, doing very well. We brought him home, and he was a very good sleeper when we first brought him home, and he ate very well. He loved to be outside in his stroller, walking with Mom while Dad was at work. And he always waited for Daddy to get home to snuggle him to sleep.
He was the perfect baby from the moment we brought him home.
When you were at hospital, did they give him vitamin K and Hep B?
They gave him Hep B.
Mhm.
Did they give him vitamin K?
I feel like they did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happened next? He went for his 2-month vaccines.
On October 20th of 2022, he went in for a well child check, and we were told that he had a virus, and he had a rash, and he had cold symptoms, but he didn't have a fever. The rash started improving over the next week. I was giving him daily breast milk baths, and he never had a fever, and he didn't seem uncomfortable. And 1 week later, on October 27th, we brought him into the pediatrician's office for his 2-month vaccinations, and he still had cold symptoms. And I had asked the pediatrician if he was sure that he needed the vaccines because he had a cold and was diagnosed with a virus a week prior. And the pediatrician told us yes, because he didn't have a fever. So we trusted the doctor to vaccinate Sawyer John, and he didn't flinch when he got the vaccines. We brought him home maybe within a half an hour after the appointment, and he let out a horrible scream that we had never heard before. We thought that he was just wet, needed to be changed, and that wasn't the case. He went to sleep fine that night, and the next day he was a little bit fussy. I held him for a while that day, and I'm so glad I did, because 34 hours after he was vaccinated, he passed away in his bassinet. I found him unresponsive and cold, and I picked him up, and I told Nick that he was gone. So Nick called 911, and we immediately performed CPR on him in our living room. We couldn't bring him back. So the EMTs came. There were so many people there. I had to run outside because I didn't want to see my baby like that. They tried for almost an hour to get him back, and they couldn't. And then we were told that he passed away from SIDS. We found out on Christmas Eve that the medical examiner had determined his death as asphyxiation.
Improper sleep conditions is what was on the report.
Improper sleep.
Suboptimal
Suboptimal
sleep conditions. He was in his bassinet on the blanket that he was laying on that was on the bassinet, and he didn't even have anything in his bassinet with him. Nothing. And to read those results on Christmas Eve, and to think that you were the one that caused your baby to pass away, it was just awful. I didn't want to accept the answer. I didn't believe it. So I requested further testing, and it took me 10 months to get it back and find somebody that would actually order all the tests for him after the medical examiner refused to do the tests and telling me that if there were aluminum in his system, there wouldn't be enough to be the cause of his death. The aluminum level in his blood was 95 micrograms per liter. Anything over 50 micrograms per liter in an adult is toxic. His was 95, and he was 8 weeks old.
It's just been an uphill battle fighting with the medical examiner's office with all this, and them trying to cover this up and make it look like it was our fault. And we knew it wasn't, so we kept fighting. And finally found someone that has our back with us and is helping us do further testing, and not just believing what the medical examiner told us, because it was basically a lie, I feel. They just told us what was easy for them to just write it off as our fault, and instead of facing this as a vaccine injury death.
Do you know what he got that day? What vaccines he got?
You get the,
Yeah, every single 2-month vaccine.
And so that pediatrics one as well, it's got like 6 or whatever in one. So he had so many.
While he was
While
trying
he
to
was
fight
sick.
something off.
He still had the
His
rash.
He still had the rash, he still had the cold symptoms.
the only thing he didn't have was a fever.
And when you questioned, is he okay? Should we hold off? What did the pediatrician say?
He told
said
us,
no.
yeah, he told us that he thought it would be fine where there was no fever, and I mean, Sawyer still looked, I mean, he was a great baby too. You wouldn't know he was sick really, but I mean, he was sick, but I think just the doctor just went off the no fever, so we thought it was going to be okay, I guess. He insisted that it would be fine getting the vaccinations that day.
He promised us he would be fine.
Have you seen that pediatrician since?
He was
No.
a traveler.
I bet.
I don't even think he remembers us.
I doubt it.
I don't know if he remembered us that day. I had to ask him to take his temperature, to listen to his lungs, to listen to his belly,
Melissa pretty much conducted the whole
to look at his
doctor's
rash,
appointment.
thinking that that might be a reason for him to say, well, we can always hold off on these vaccines or spread them out. We didn't know that there was an option to spread them out, spread the vaccines out over time, or to just say no. But we already felt like we were looked at different because neither of us got the COVID-19 vaccine. And all of my doctors knew that.
Even in the hospital when she was pregnant, I mean, it's hard to point fingers, but we definitely were treated different in the hospital. We're looked at different because they knew we weren't As soon as we came in, they knew we weren't. And I could tell they knew we weren't vaccinated. We got put in that, on that side of things as the unvaccinated.
Because you didn't take the COVID shot.
I lost my job right before getting pregnant with Sawyer for not getting the COVID-19 vaccine, and I don't think that if I would have gotten the COVID-19 vaccine that I would have been able to carry him, because I have endometriosis. So I've struggled to get pregnant for many years, and when we finally had Sawyer, he was my miracle.
He really was.
Baby. I didn't think I'd ever be able to carry a child full term. And then I did.
And he was
All for him to be taken away. And this is what I have left. This is my baby now.
So his ashes are in there.
I had him cremated because I wanted him to be with us.
We wanted to take him everywhere. We went.
Like we would if he was still alive.
It's so brave of you to be here. It hasn't even been a year since you lost Sawyer. And you're here on the bus telling your story. And we were talking before about how you want this to stop. What is your message to that young mum?
This is why we're here. I can't tell anybody not to get their children vaccinated or to get them vaccinated. But I would just recommend that you really think about it before bringing your child in to be vaccinated, because really babies don't need to be vaccinated at all. A lot of places wait until they're at least 2 years old because that's when the blood-brain barrier grows together. And harmful toxins can't pass it as well. Babies, when they're this young, that blood-brain barrier has not closed off. And I think that's how they found all the aluminum. It got into his brain, ceased his respirations, and caused cardiac arrest. There's no antidote for vaccines. So there was nothing we could do to bring back. You can take care of your own child. You don't need a pediatrician. You can measure your child and weigh your child right at home. There's no reason you need a pediatrician, because all they are there for in the beginning is just to, I feel like, just to push the vaccines. I'm a nurse, and I feel even more like a failure now. I feel like I failed Sawyer as both a mom and a nurse, because I should have known. But in school, as a nurse, all they do is teach you the schedule of childhood vaccines. They don't tell you what's in them, what they can do, how they react to the body once inside. And we trusted them.
We did.
And I trusted what I learned in school. Some days I just, I started nursing as a career because I wanted to help people. And now I feel like we're helping people after the medical system has already ruined them.
Okay. I have really no words. I don't know what we say to you, other than we're really sorry. We were lied to. You were lied to. In your profession and as a mother and a father. And we will put Sawyer's photo on the bus, we will write his name on the bus, and we will not forget him. I'm going to tell you that. I'm sorry, guys. People watching now just sending you so much love. You're not on your own, sadly. There's so many who see these babies. Thank you for speaking.
We just want to spread awareness to other parents and let them know that
No parent should have to go through this.
to make
Especially
sure
if it
you're
can be prevented. This can be prevented.
advocate really hard for your children. They're your children, not the doctors.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.